The storm before sunrise. The 38th floor of Winter's Enterprise gleamed under the early morning sun. Natalie Brooks clutched her leather portfolio against her chest as she stepped out of the elevator. Her navy blazer was perfectly tailored, her auburn hair swept into an elegant twist. She had rehearsed her presentation 40 times in the mirror last night. Today was the day she would prove herself. The executive boardroom doors loomed before her like gates to another realm. Through the glass walls, she could see them already seated. 12 senior executives in their pressed suits and polished shoes. And at the head of the table sat Theodore Winters himself. The man made of ice. Theodore Winters was a legend in the business world. At 41, he had transformed a failing manufacturing company into a global technology empire. His jawline was sharp, his dark hair touched with distinguished gray at the temples. But it was his eyes that unsettled people. Deep blue and calculating, they seemed to see through every mask, every pretense. Natalie had studied him from afar during her 2 years at the company. She had watched him dismantle competitors with surgical precision. She had seen him reject proposals that other CEOs would have celebrated. Theodore Winters did not accept good enough. He demanded excellence, and he made no apologies for it. The presentation. Natalie began her presentation with steady confidence. She had spent 4 months developing this strategy for expanding their tech division into emerging Asian markets. Her research was flawless. Her projections were conservative yet promising. Every slide built upon the last with mathematical precision. The executives nodded along, taking notes. A few smiled encouragingly. But Theodore remained perfectly still, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his expression unreadable. When she finished, the room filled with polite applause. Natalie exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief. Then Theodore spoke. The challenge. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade through silk. He stood slowly, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket with deliberate care. Each movement was controlled, measured. He walked toward her presentation screen, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. When he finally spoke, his words were chosen with devastating precision. He questioned her data sources. He challenged her assumptions about regional stability. He picked apart her timeline with the skill of a surgeon removing a tumor. Every weakness she had tried to bury, every small uncertainty she had hoped no one would notice, he exposed with ruthless clarity. Natalie felt heat rising to her cheeks. But something inside her refused to break. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let this man dismiss her work without a fight. The rebellion. She straightened her spine and met his gaze directly. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. She defended her research point by point. She explained her methodology. She stood her ground even as the other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Nobody challenged Theodore Winters. Nobody argued with him in front of the board. But Natalie was done being invisible. She was done playing it safe. Theodore stopped mid-sentence, his blue eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For 3 heartbeats, the room held its breath. Then he said something that changed everything. He told her that her work was brilliant. That her analysis was exactly what the company needed. That she had the courage to defend her vision, and that courage was rarer than genius. But then his expression shifted. Something darker crossed his features. He told her she was dangerous. That she made him question decisions he had spent 20 years perfecting. That she walked into a room and everything else became background noise. The confession. The other executives were dismissed. The boardroom emptied in seconds, leaving only Natalie and Theodore standing in the morning light that poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Natalie felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was not how corporate meetings ended. This was not the Theodore Winters she had studied from afar. He moved closer, and she could smell the subtle scent of his cologne. Something expensive and understated, like sandalwood and bergamot. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He told her things that no CEO should tell an employee. He confessed that he noticed everything about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way she stayed late every Tuesday to help junior staff with their projects. The way she brought coffee to the security guards on cold mornings. He told her that for the first time in 2 decades, someone had made him want something more than his next acquisition. That she terrified him because she made him feel human again. The breaking point. Natalie should have left. Every professional instinct screamed at her to maintain boundaries, to protect her career, to walk away from this dangerous territory. But she did not move. Because in Theodore's eyes, she saw something she recognized. She saw loneliness. She saw a man who had built walls so high that he had forgotten what it felt like to be touched by genuine warmth. She asked him why he was telling her this. Why now? Why her? Theodore's hand lifted slowly, giving her every chance to step away. His fingers brushed her cheek with unexpected gentleness. His touch was warm, almost reverent. He told her that he was tired. Tired of being alone in crowded rooms. Tired of success that tasted like ashes. Tired of winning at everything except life. The promise. Natalie heard herself speaking before her mind caught up with her heart. She told him she felt it too. This impossible pull between them. This recognition that defied logic and professional wisdom. But she gave him conditions. She would not be his distraction or his midlife crisis. If he wanted to pursue this, whatever this was, he needed to prove he was serious. He needed to show her the real Theodore Winters, not the corporate titan, but the man beneath the armor. Theodore agreed without hesitation. He asked for one chance. One opportunity to prove that what he felt was real. As they stood in the empty boardroom with the city sprawling 40 floors below them, neither realized they had just crossed a line that would transform everything. Neither knew the obstacles they would face or the price they would pay for choosing connection over caution. But in that moment, surrounded by leather chairs and presentation screens and the promise of something neither could name, it felt like the only choice that mattered. The morning sun painted golden squares across the marble floor between them. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. But inside that boardroom, time seemed to pause. Theodore extended his hand. Not as a CEO to an employee, but as one vulnerable human to another. Natalie took it, the dance of shadows. The weeks following their confession moved like a dream wrapped in danger. Natalie found herself assigned to work directly with Theodore on the Asian expansion project. This meant long hours in his private office, late evenings reviewing market reports, and countless moments when their professional facade would crack just enough to reveal the truth simmering beneath. Theodore's office occupied the entire top-floor corner of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the harbor on one side and the sprawling city on the other. The space was minimalist yet warm, with dark wood furniture and shelves lined with books that surprised Natalie. Philosophy. Poetry. Classic literature mixed with business theory. She discovered Theodore was nothing like the cold executive the world saw. In private, he asked questions that went deeper than surface politeness. He wanted to know about her childhood in Portland, her relationship with her younger sister, her dreams beyond climbing the corporate ladder. Midnight conversations. It was during their third consecutive late-night session that the walls began truly crumbling. Natalie had been reviewing financial data until her eyes burned. She rubbed her temples, fighting off a headache that had been building for hours. Theodore appeared beside her desk with 2 cups of tea. Not coffee, but chamomile tea with honey. Exactly how she liked it, though she had never told him. He pulled up a chair beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping tea and watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness below. Theodore broke the silence first. He told her about his mother. About watching her work herself to exhaustion trying to provide for him and his sister after their father abandoned them. About the tiny apartment where they lived, where he could hear his mother crying through thin walls at night. He described the moment he decided to become successful. He was 12 years old, standing in a grocery store while his mother counted pennies to buy bread. A man in an expensive suit had pushed past them without a glance, as if they were invisible. Theodore swore that day he would never be invisible again. Never be powerless. Never depend on anyone. The cost of success. Natalie listened without interrupting. She watched emotions flicker across Theodore's face that she had never seen in boardrooms. Vulnerability. Regret. A deep sadness that success had never quite erased. He built his empire brick by brick, he explained. Every decision was calculated. Every relationship was strategic. He learned to read people like balance sheets, to identify weaknesses and exploit opportunities. He became exactly what he needed to be to survive and thrive. But somewhere along the way, he forgot how to be just Theodore. The man became the myth. The person became the position. He woke up at 41 years old in a penthouse apartment that felt like a museum, surrounded by expensive things that meant nothing, achieving goals that left him hollow. Natalie set down her tea and turned to face him fully. She asked the question that had been haunting her since their first real conversation. What changed? What made him suddenly want something different? Theodore smiled, and it transformed his entire face. It was not his corporate smile, polished and calculated. This smile was genuine, almost shy. He told her it was simple. He saw her defending a junior analyst in a meeting 6 months ago. The analyst had made a mistake in a report, and another executive was tearing into him publicly. Natalie had stepped in, taken responsibility even though it was not her error, and turned the situation into a teaching moment. Theodore had watched from the back of the room, and something inside him shifted. He realized he had spent 20 years in business and could not remember the last time he had protected someone without expecting something in return. Could not remember the last time he had shown grace instead of judgment. Natalie's truth. Natalie felt tears prick at her eyes. She confessed her own story then. Growing up with parents who loved her but never quite understood her ambition. Being told repeatedly that she should be grateful for stability instead of chasing dreams. Leaving home at 18 with $500 and a fierce determination to prove she was more than her circumstances. She talked about the years of struggle. Working 2 jobs while finishing college. Living in an apartment with 3 roommates where she could barely afford her share of rent. Sending resumes to hundreds of companies and receiving rejection after rejection. When she finally landed her first real job, she promised herself she would never be vulnerable again. Never let anyone see weakness. Never depend on anyone but herself. She built armor around her heart and wore ambition like a shield. But the armor was heavy. The shield was exhausting. She had achieved success, but somewhere along the way, she had stopped feeling fully alive. She moved through life checking boxes instead of experiencing moments. The moment of connection. Theodore reached out and took her hand. His fingers intertwined with hers, and the simple gesture felt more intimate than any embrace. They sat like that for long minutes, 2 people who had spent years building walls finally allowing someone to see the truth beneath. He told her he was terrified. Not of business risks or market fluctuations, but of this. Of caring about someone enough that their happiness mattered more than his own comfort. Of wanting someone so much that the thought of losing them made his chest tight. Natalie squeezed his hand. She admitted she was scared too. Scared that this was just a moment that would pass. Scared that the differences in their positions would eventually destroy what they were building. Scared that she was falling for someone who might wake up one day and realize she was not worth the complications. Theodore shifted closer. He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. He promised her that whatever fears she had, they were unfounded. He was not a man who played with emotions or made promises lightly. When he committed to something, he saw it through. The first kiss. The kiss happened so naturally it felt inevitable. Theodore leaned in slowly, giving Natalie every chance to pull away. But she did not want to pull away. She wanted this moment, this connection, this feeling of being truly seen and valued. Their lips met softly at first. A gentle exploration, a question being asked and answered. Then deeper, more urgent, as weeks of restrained desire finally found release. Natalie's hands moved to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath his expensive shirt. Theodore's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until no space remained between them. The kiss was not hurried or clumsy. It was perfect in its imperfection. A first kiss between two people who had been moving toward this moment since the day they truly saw each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Theodore rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, a smile playing at his lips. He whispered 3 words that changed everything. He told her this was real. That she was not a distraction or a phase. That he wanted to build something with her, something that mattered more than quarterly reports or market dominance. The new beginning. Natalie laughed softly, a sound of pure joy mixed with disbelief. She told him they were probably making a terrible mistake. That office romances never ended well. That people would talk and judge and make their lives complicated. Theodore opened his eyes and looked at her with such intensity that her breath caught. He said he had spent his entire life making safe choices, calculated decisions, avoiding risks that could not be quantified on spreadsheets. He was done playing it safe. Done choosing loneliness over the possibility of real connection. They talked until sunrise painted the sky pink and gold. They made plans for how to handle their relationship professionally. They acknowledged the challenges ahead and promised to face them together. As dawn broke over the city, Theodore walked Natalie to her car. He kissed her goodbye in the empty parking garage, and it felt like sealing a promise. A commitment to something neither fully understood but both desperately wanted. Natalie drove home with her heart full and her mind racing. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. She knew people would question her motives and his judgment. She knew there would be obstacles neither of them had anticipated. But for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Not just surviving or achieving, but living. Feeling. Connecting with another human in a way that made everything else seem less important. And as she watched the sun rise over the city, she allowed herself to hope. To believe that maybe, just maybe, 2 people who had spent years building walls could learn to build something better together. Something real. Something lasting. Something worth fighting for, the price of truth. Monday morning arrived with the weight of reality. Natalie stepped into the office building feeling like she was entering a battlefield. She and Theodore had agreed to keep their relationship private until they could navigate the professional complexities, but secrets in corporate environments had a way of surfacing like oil on water. The first challenge came during the weekly executive meeting. Natalie presented updates on the Asian expansion project, and every eye in the room seemed to scrutinize her differently. When Theodore asked a clarifying question, she felt the shift in energy. The way colleagues exchanged glances. The subtle raising of eyebrows. Jennifer Park, the chief financial officer and Theodore's longest-serving executive, lingered after the meeting ended. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She waited until the room cleared before speaking. Her words were measured but pointed. She reminded Natalie that workplace relationships, especially those involving significant power imbalances, rarely ended without casualties. She was not unkind, but her message was clear. Natalie's career, her reputation, everything she had built could crumble if this situation was not handled with extreme care. The weight of judgment. Natalie felt the truth of those words in her bones. That evening, she met Theodore at a quiet restaurant across town, far from their usual haunts. They sat in a corner booth, and she shared her concerns. Theodore listened without interrupting. Then he did something that surprised her. He agreed. He acknowledged that the power dynamic was real and problematic. He suggested they consult with human resources, establish clear professional boundaries, and consider whether Natalie should transfer to a different division to eliminate any appearance of favoritism. But even as he said the words, pain flickered across his features. The thought of seeing her less, of creating distance when they had just found closeness, clearly cut deep. Natalie reached across the table and took his hand. She told him she had a different idea. She had been contacted 2 weeks earlier by a competitor offering her a position as vice president of global strategy. She had declined at the time, but perhaps it was worth reconsidering. Not to end their relationship, but to put them on more equal footing professionally. Theodore's grip tightened on her hand. The thought of her leaving his company clearly troubled him, but he understood the wisdom in it. If she held a senior position elsewhere, their relationship would be between equals in different organizations. The complications would not disappear, but they would change shape. Family revelations. The following weekend, Natalie invited Theodore to meet her family. Her parents still lived in the modest Portland neighborhood where she grew up. The house was small but filled with warmth and the smell of her mother's cooking. Her father, Robert, was a retired teacher with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Her mother, Patricia, welcomed Theodore with genuine warmth despite obvious curiosity about this sophisticated man their daughter had brought home. Over dinner, Theodore did something Natalie had never witnessed in professional settings. He listened more than he spoke. He asked Robert about his years teaching high school history. He helped Patricia clear dishes despite her protests. He sat on the worn couch and looked through family photo albums with genuine interest. Natalie's younger sister, Claire, a graduate student studying social work, was more direct in her assessment. She pulled Natalie aside in the kitchen and asked the hard questions. Was Theodore treating her well? Did he respect her boundaries? Was this relationship about genuine connection, or was Natalie another trophy for a wealthy man? Natalie answered honestly. She admitted her own fears and doubts. But she also described the Theodore her sister had just witnessed. The man who listened and laughed and seemed genuinely interested in the lives of people who could offer him nothing except authentic connection. Theodore's sacrifice. 2 days later, Theodore made a decision that stunned the business world. He announced his resignation as CEO of Winters Enterprise. Not immediately, but within 6 months. He would transition to chairman of the board, maintaining strategic oversight but removing himself from day-to-day operations. The news sent shockwaves through the company and the industry. Theodore Winters was Winters Enterprise. His leadership had defined the company for 2 decades. Speculation ran wild about his motivations. Some predicted health issues. Others suggested board pressure. No one guessed the truth. Theodore called Natalie to his office the day of the announcement. His face showed the toll of the decision, but also a strange peace. He explained that he had spent 20 years building an empire at the expense of building a life. He was ready for something different. Something real. He wanted time to travel, to read books that had nothing to do with business, to wake up without his first thought being about quarterly earnings. He wanted space in his life for a relationship that mattered more than his next acquisition. But more than that, he wanted to remove the power imbalance between them. As chairman, he would no longer be Natalie's direct superior. She could remain at the company or pursue other opportunities without their relationship creating ethical complications. The grand gesture. 3 months into his transition, Theodore surprised Natalie with a trip. He arranged for her to take a week off work, which itself was unusual. She had not taken a full vacation in 3 years. He flew them to a small coastal town in Maine that Natalie had mentioned once in passing. She had gone there as a child with her grandmother, and it held cherished memories of simpler times. They stayed in a bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean. They walked on beaches at sunrise. They ate lobster rolls at a weathered picnic table. They read books on a porch swing and talked for hours about everything and nothing. On the fourth evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Theodore told her a story. He described the boy he had been before ambition hardened him. A boy who loved drawing and dreamed of being an architect. A boy who believed in beauty and connection before life taught him to value only strength and success. He told her that meeting her had awakened that boy again. That she made him remember there were things worth wanting beyond money and power. That she had given him the courage to choose differently. The promise. Theodore dropped to one knee on that beach, with waves crashing behind him and seagulls calling overhead. He pulled out a ring, simple but beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. He did not ask her to marry him. Not yet. He said they had known each other too briefly for that, despite the intensity of their connection. But he wanted her to have this ring as a promise. A commitment that what they were building mattered. That he was in this for the long journey, not just the exciting beginning. He promised to support her dreams, whatever form they took. To celebrate her successes without trying to claim credit. To be her partner in the truest sense, sharing both burdens and joys. Natalie accepted the ring with tears streaming down her face. She slipped it onto her right hand, saving the left for when they were both ready for that next step. She promised him the same things he had promised her. Partnership. Support. Honest communication even when it was difficult. The new chapter. 6 months later, Natalie accepted the vice president position at Sterling Tech, Winters Enterprises' former competitor. Theodore had recused himself from any discussions about the move, but he celebrated her decision. It was the right choice for her career and for their relationship. Her first day at the new company, Theodore sent flowers to her office. Not an extravagant arrangement that would raise questions, but a simple bouquet of wildflowers with a note that read, "Proud of you. Always." They navigated their new reality with care and intention. They kept their relationship private from the business world for nearly a year, wanting to establish Natalie's credibility in her new role before going public. When they finally did attend an industry event together as a couple, the response was mixed but not devastating. Some people questioned Natalie's qualifications, suggesting her success was tied to her relationship. But her track record spoke louder than gossip. Within her first year at Sterling Tech, she led an expansion that increased revenue by 38%. Her reputation stood on its own merit. Forever begins. 2 years after their first kiss in Theodore's office, on a quiet Sunday morning in the apartment they now shared, Theodore asked again. This time, the question was different. They were making breakfast together, a weekend ritual they both cherished. Natalie was whisking eggs while Theodore sliced fruit. Sunlight streamed through kitchen windows, and soft music played in the background. Theodore set down his knife and turned to face her fully. He asked if she would marry him. Not because of grand gestures or perfect timing, but because he could not imagine his life without her. Because she had taught him that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. Because every morning he woke up grateful that she had taken a chance on a man who had forgotten how to be human. Natalie said yes before he finished speaking. She launched herself into his arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. The eggs burned on the stove, forgotten in the moment that changed everything. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony on a beach in Maine, returning to the place where Theodore had first promised forever. Natalie's family sat on one side, Theodore's sister and her children on the other. Jennifer Park attended, having become an unexpected friend and mentor to them both. The ceremony was simple but perfect. They wrote their own vows, promising to continue choosing each other every day. Promising to support individual growth while nurturing their connection. Promising to never let success matter more than the person sleeping beside them. The truth of love. Years later, when people asked Natalie how she made it work, how she balanced a demanding career with a relationship that had started in such complicated circumstances, she always gave the same answer. Love was not about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It was about two people deciding that the connection between them mattered more than convenience or caution. It was about being brave enough to be vulnerable and wise enough to keep choosing each other even when it was difficult. Theodore had taught her that success without connection was just noise. She had taught him that power without compassion was just loneliness wearing expensive suits. Together, they built something neither could have created alone. Not just a relationship, but a life that honored both their ambitions and their hearts. A life where boardrooms and beach walks both had value. Where quarterly reports and quiet conversations both mattered. Standing in their home, looking at the life they had created, Natalie understood what true wealth meant. It was not measured in bank accounts or corner offices. It was measured in moments of genuine connection. In someone who knew your fears and loved you anyway. In building something together that made both people better than they were alone. Theodore found her there, lost in thought, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. He whispered the same words he had spoken in that boardroom years ago, but this time with different meaning. He told her she was dangerous. She made him want to be better. She made him question everything he thought he knew about what mattered. But now, instead of terrifying him, it filled him with gratitude. Natalie turned in his arms and kissed him. A kiss that held years of history and promises for years to come. A kiss that said what words could not quite capture. They had found forever in the most unexpected place. In a boardroom confrontation that became a confession. In late-night conversations that became commitments. In taking a chance on something real when safe would have been so much easier. And every single day, they chose it again. Chose each other. Chose love over fear. Chose connection over convenience. That, Natalie understood, was the true secret. Forever was not a destination you reached. It was a choice you made every morning when you opened your eyes and decided that this person, this connection, this love was worth fighting for. Again and again and again. The end.